1 in 6 older Australians experience some form of elder abuse each year. And for many, it's not a stranger or a scammer, but actually someone they know and someone that they trust. Now, financial abuse is one of the most common and often hidden forms of elderly abuse. And it might be something like pressure to hand over money or controlling someone's account or just quietly draining their savings under the guise of help. Now, the National Elder Abuse phone line received about 9,000 calls in less than a year, which, my dear friends, was apparently a 36% increase on the year before. And yet only 1 in 3 victims apparently reaches out for help. Now, we know with cost of living pressures and rising house costs and, inheritances that are looming and people becoming impatient, that the expectation that older Australians should share or gift their wealth early is becoming an issue that is more and more prevalent. So today we're going to talk about what happens when people that are meant to be trusted cross the line. My wonderful guest discovered that her own mother was being financially abused by someone in her family, and she has bravely agreed to share her story, of course, not to expose names, but to help others understand what this kind of abuse can look like. We're going to talk about how to recognize signs, what recovery might look like, both from a financial standpoint, but also an emotional one. So today's conversation, it might be difficult, but I think with so many of us with older or elderly or aging family members, it is a conversation that we absolutely need to have, because protecting our parents or our elderly family members and one day ourselves, I think very much starts with awareness.
This is a podcast for everyone that wants to learn how to make fierce and bold choices with their money. We'll talk about how to shape your money mindset, investing for your future, your spending habits, the good and the bad, plus how to achieve your financial goals, and most of all, how to be financially fierce. I'm a financial educator and I want to empower you to be more in control of your money and build the financial future that you want. I run the Greenhouse Money Growing Program, and you can find details of that in the podcast show notes. My name is Jessica Brady. It's time to get financially fierce.
Okay, so as I mentioned at the top, we today are talking about something quite heavy, but I think this definitely comes to light when we are able to interview someone who has experienced this and who has, a story to share with us. And so I am hugely, hugely grateful to have with me today Pascale Helyar-Moray, who is going to share her story. Hi, Pascale, welcome.
Hi, Jess. Thanks for having me. Lovely to be here.
Okay, so can you take us back to when it was that you first realised something wasn't right with your mum's finances?
So last year, I suggested to Mum that I become her enduring guardian and power of attorney. And the power of attorney also includes being her financial guardian. Now, the reason I suggested this was because there was a lot of other, nefarious and very underhand dealings going on within the family. And as the person within the family who is both educated on matters financial, so just by quick way of recap, I have a Master's of Commerce and I've worked in financial services for almost 30 years. I could see what was happening, and there were some really not even red flags. These were like red banners being waved. And so, and also by way of context, Mum is this very interesting combination of naive, but also if you looked up Egypt on a map, you would find her there because she lives in denial. Sorry, that was just a really bad attempt at a joke just to try and lighten it a bit. So she's this very interesting combination of naive, but, just completely lives in another reality. And I think that is very much like a self-protection kind of mechanism. And she has, she has no commercial, no business, no financial education, really. So I suggested to her, when I could see these great big red banners, like hitting me over the head just about, that we moved to this arrangement to protect her. And I did have to explain why I was suggesting to this. I think it might have been 50 times, because as I'm sure many of our listeners are, at this age, 78, 79, there's, cognitive processing is not what it was, right? There's definitely dementia, I would say, although it's undiagnosed. But so I just had to keep saying it. I did feel like I was a goldfish, saying the same, just swimming around and saying the same things, 20 times a day. But eventually, I introduced her to a lawyer who specializes in these sorts of cases. And she was terrific, and she was able to have a very straightforward and rational conversation with Mum and explain to Mum why she also thought it was a good idea to be doing this. So I was made POA, which, as I mentioned, includes the financial guardianship. Earlier this year, so earlier in 2025, my mother and father separated after 55 years of marriage. And he had always been the financial person, for better or worse, mostly worse. But the reason I mention that is that now I became her financial person, right? And so I did things like, she didn't understand the difference between credit card and debit card, right? So we repaid the credit card. I put her on a budget, which she'd never been on ever in her life. Printed it out and, put it on her fridge and so on. And I said, okay, so in a few months' time, we're going to check back in to see how the budget's working for you, because I was using my sort of best guess estimates. And so it was when I checked in after a few months that, with her permission, she logged into her banking, downloaded a statement, sent it to me, and I looked at the last few months of transactions, and a couple of things really stood out to me. Number one, the volume of transactions was insane.
Oh.
Insane. And, don't forget, she's at this stage, she's also struggling with a really bad hip. So, but she's not traveling the world. She's just running errands and so on. So the volume of transactions was insane. And this is over a 4-month period. But then I spent, I sorted all the categorizations, I divided everything into groceries and, bills and car and pet and so on. And the second thing I noticed was that some of the category spend on a per month basis, because I looked at the totals, but also on a per month basis, because I wanted to see if how, if we were roughly tracking to the budget that I had set.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the category spend was extraordinary. And that was really so those two things combined made me understand that I needed to dive deeper. So what I then found was, don't forget, I'm a family of one of a family of 5 with my husband and 3 kids. So I know I've got a good handle on what our groceries cost each month and what our water bills are, et cetera, et cetera. And so looking at, for example, the grocery category, I was just like, how is Mum spending roughly as much as we are, and we're a family of 5? how is this possible? And then when I looked deeper into that grocery spend, I saw there were a number of cash withdrawals. So money being taken out from the supermarket.
Right.
But that wasn't it. There were more huge red flags, being the volume of transactions at places and stores she just does not use. So, men's clothing, for example. So, and various online shopping platforms. And I know where mum shops. I know which brands she likes and so on. And we can safely say that Gazman, which is a men's retailer, is not one of them. Similarly, ASOS, Adidas, Lacoste, like these are not her brands. So by this stage, I had a number of question marks over what was happening. And the next thing I needed to do was sit down with her and ask her about them.
So, to do a recap, your mum has obviously had quite a big year. So, she's in her late 70s. Presumably, she now lives alone, having become separated from your father, who has managed the money and sounds like household sort of budgets and decisions for their marriage,
Forever.
which sounds like forever.
Yes.
Forever. So, your mum is in this brave new world where she's navigating living alone, probably the emotional stuff that comes with separating at any age, but certainly, navigating that at this life stage, I would imagine is a challenge as well. Having to come to grips with managing money and having control over money for the very first time.
Yes.
And probably feeling like a fish out of water and having some health, issues, be it cognitive or physical.
Correct.
Or both, it sounds like.
Correct.
So there's obviously a huge amount going on for your mum.
Yeah.
You've obviously then, seen some things that are quite alarming and, not the red flags, but like the bunting's worth, the banner's worth of things that just don't seem to kind of add up. What do you then do? How do you balance that sort of instinctive feeling in your gut that like something is not right here, and also not wanting to jump necessarily to conclusions of what is happening and making your mum feel worried or disempowered if she is making those sort of spending decisions? Like how did you navigate even having that conversation with her?
Yeah, it was difficult. And the most alarming thing that I could see straight off the bat was that, even without having had the conversation with her, was that she was going backwards to the tune of $6,000 a month.
So $6,000 over
$6,000
spending
a month. Correct.
Month based on what you had budgeted for her.
I mean, forget what I had budgeted, but she was, in like at the end of every month, she was $6,000 down compared to the previous month. And this was a very consistent pattern over the 4 months. So it wasn't like there were a couple of massive, months or a one-off month where there was some huge bill or something. This was consistent. And that was probably the most alarming thing, because as we know, at that age, money is finite, and so I knew that something had to be done pretty damn fast. But how, as you say, how do you put that to your mother, who is, as you say, grappling with all the things, and is technologically challenged as well, in a way that just doesn't, send her over the edge. So what then followed was a really frustrating 3 weeks. And it was 3 weeks where I was calling her, I was messaging her on a couple of different channels like SMS and WhatsApp, and just calling and trying to say, Mum, we need to meet. And it was very interesting to me that there was no response, like no response. And this is where I started to get even more concerned. She doesn't live far away. She's like 5 minutes. But this non-response was very strange. And my hackles were up, and the hair on the back of my neck was also up.
After the break, Pascale, what I would love for you to tell us, if you feel comfortable doing so, and I recognize that this is all of the things, it takes immense bravery to share this story for so many reasons. And also there's potential, implications. So, I'm hugely, hugely grateful, because I think sharing your story helps us realize that this is honestly something that could happen to anyone in anyone's family. But when we come back after the break, I would love for you to share with us, now you have found all of these red flags and you see that the bank account is kind of bleeding money. What did you do? How did you approach it? And what did your mother say to your suspicions or inquiries around that? So stick with us after the break. We were going to go into what happens next in this story.
If you're after personal financial advice, don't get it from a podcast. If you would like help based on your own personal situation, head over to moneypodcast.com.au, click Get Help, and we'd be happy to introduce you to one of our trusted professionals. Our panel of vetted financial advisors and mortgage brokers work with people all over Australia so they can connect with you wherever you are. That's moneypodcast.com.au and click Get Help.
Okay, so Pascale, what does happen? You talk to your mum, or you reach out to mum. Does mum live close to you? Actually, let's get some context. How far away? Because
Yes.
this is something that I think a lot of people are navigating as well, where their family is not close, so it's not easy
Right.
to have as much visibility.
Right.
How close is your
So
mum
she
to you?
lives, and this is part of the irony, she lives 5 minutes away. And I, that's very fortunate, because I know there are so many, families where, parents might be interstate or overseas or what have you, but she's literally 5 minutes away, which is why when I couldn't contact her, when I couldn't get in contact with her for 3 weeks, I am not joking, it was 3 weeks of me, phoning, messaging. It was as frustrating as all hell. Like, she wasn't returning my calls. I phoned 5 times. I sent 3 messages. We've got a WhatsApp channel as well. I was sending messages on SMS and WhatsApp. And when I finally did manage to get in contact with her, it was coming to the point where I was thinking, Jesus, do I need to doorstop my own mother? And then when I did get in contact with her, after 2 weeks, she's like, "Oh, I've been so busy." And I'm like, "Mum," because I had also been, giving little bits of information on the messages, right? Like, I don't want to alarm you, but we urgently need to talk about your budget. So it wasn't like I was, she didn't have any inkling of what was being said or what was coming down the pipe. But she was just avoid. But there is another possible explanation for all this, which is that the person responsible was deleting messages off her phone.
That's what I was thinking. I'm thinking there's some sort of control element here where the ability for you to actually have that contact is being severed.
Yes.
But then when you did speak to her, she's like, "Oh, sorry, I've been so busy." So is it that she was just avoiding because maybe she was scared of having the budget conversation, or a bit of both maybe?
I think she was, yes, I agree. She was scared of the budget conversation. She was scared of, because by this stage I was getting increasingly desperate. And so I was trying to write messages to her in a way that conveyed the urgency of what and the importance of what was going on, but didn't implicate her carer, who I suspected was the problem here. That wouldn't cause any issue between them, because I thought if he is reading her phone, then I don't want anything dangerous, right, to happen to mum. I don't want her to be harmed in any way or compromised and so on. But it did eventually get to the point where I was having to put headline numbers, right, in messages because she wasn't taking the calls. She was like so busy having coffee or whatever that I was starting to have to put like the key points, like you're going backwards $6,000 a month. Half of that amount, $3,000, I suspect is not your spending. So by now I was like getting increasingly desperate and like, come on, sit up, take notice, etc. And then finally, she called me back and she was really upset. She was like, I don't like the inferences that you're making. I said, what are you talking about? There's no inferences here. I'm just working with the data that I have in front of me, and the data is from your bank account. So, but we really need to meet up in person, just you and I need to go through this with you. And you've been dodging and stalling, but we need to meet this weekend. So eventually, after about 3 weeks of trying to get in contact with her, to tell her and just take her through it all, we did meet at a local cafe.
So, Pascale, in terms of your mum either not seeing or actively ignoring the communication that you were sort of putting out to her, was that a real shift in terms of the usual communication, if you don't mind me asking? Was it normal for her to kind of ignore messages or calls or, SOS stuff in the past, or was this a marked difference in behaviour?
New. This was new, like to this extent. Yeah. As I mentioned, her happy place is in denial, but the not hearing from her for, I think at one point it came to about 8 or 9 days where I hadn't heard at all, was really unusual. And that's when I started to think, is somebody else, have they got access to a phone?
Yeah. And I think that does happen. That definitely does happen. We need to sort of be conscious about that. If you are, I guess, making that first step, you've got to be really cognizant of the fact that that person might not have, when we talk about financial abuse, there's often so many other elements that come into this around coercive control.
Absolutely. Yes.
Physical harm, all of those things sort of come into play. And so, yeah, I think it would be no doubt stressful to even make the connection that something is going wrong, and then to not be able to contact someone who you generally can have no problem contacting. I can imagine that, for me, I'd be spiraling. I'd be like, I'm coming, or I'm sending the police. Like, you best reply in the next hour, otherwise I'm doing something, drastic here. Because what you kind of feel like, what other choice do I have?
Right. I was really running out of options, and I knew that even if I dropped a note in her mailbox, and just, also for our listeners, yes, I'm 5 minutes away, but I guess part of me really didn't believe or expect that it would take me almost 3 weeks to actually see my own mother when she lives 5 minutes away. And I also knew that if I dropped a note in her letterbox, that would be probably read. And so I was just about to get to the point of like going round and knocking on the door, because I knew she was around. Like I'd sight her as I drove in past the shops or whatever. So she was definitely around. She was alive, but she was incommunicado, and I didn't know how much was coming from her not wanting to know, but also how many of my messages were being deleted.
So you get together, you meet up at a neutral place, just you and her. What happens then? Is there a realization from her that this is real, or is it still, you can imagine no one wants to believe that someone very close to them, particularly someone in their family, could or would ever do that. We like to think that it would never happen to us, especially if you've, lived in a place where, denial is your friend. I mean, haven't we all? does she start to recognize that something is wrong in that meeting? Or does she, I think one of the common things that we hear is that people actually turn on the person who is brave enough to have that
Helping them.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happens in that coffee meeting?
Well, she pulls out a 6-page note that she's written of all the things that she wants to say to me around. I know it was not how I thought the coffee would start, but about how I'm like in her business and she doesn't like it and da 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 and blah blah and I'm sitting there. I think gobsmacked is a good word, and then by page 3, I've kind of I'm out of patience and I can't listen anymore. And I remind her that this, she signed, we signed a document that gave me power of attorney, which includes financial guardianship. And then I read the extract from that document. And because I've got my laptop with me, because I've got all my, my spreadsheets to show of the analysis of her banking. And I read from that document the paragraph that says, da, 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 and she looks surprised. And so by now I'm thinking, okay, is this dementia? Is this, has she just totally forgotten? And I said, Mum, this is, I'm just doing my job here, right? And believe me, I have more than enough on my plate. Dealing with your finances and having this, being at loggerheads with you is not, it's not a place I want to be. So, but this is my responsibility. As we both went into this together, and so really, I'm performing my role as your financial guardian. And she kind of backed down a bit after that and went, oh, okay. Well, do you have a copy of the document? And I thought, I know why she wants a copy. This is so she can show the carer that what I am saying is true. And I said, look, yep, sure, happy to send you. And then I pulled out the spreadsheet.
Before we get to the spreadsheet, so you're met, I think it's fair to say, you're met with hostility and this idea that, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but like you're intervening when you shouldn't be. You're sort of the problem.
Yes.
Leave me alone.
Yeah.
I'm capable. I'm doing this myself, which obviously there's a whole backstory about how did someone come to 6 pages of notes on all of this, and before then. And I think, again, this is around the control and the manipulation that we can see, particularly if someone has got cognitive issues. So that would have been probably, honestly, like you think you're helping someone as someone that you love and trust and care about, and to be met with that, you can imagine so many people would be like, oh my fuck, like what am I doing? Like this is not what I signed up for.
Why don't I just get up and walk away? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be a very fair reaction. Okay, so then you bring out the spreadsheet, which she's not seen yet.
So I mentioned earlier that there were 2 key things that had struck me. So I started with the headline, because by now I've been waiting 3 weeks to say all the following, right? Like verbally to her. I've said bits and pieces in messages and so on. But I started with the headline, which is, you're going backwards financially to the tune of $6,000 a month, right? Why is that happening? Number one, the volume of transactions is nuts. And number 2, there is spending on here in various categories and at various retailers, which is literally not adding up. I didn't take her through all 400 lines or whatever it was of transactions. I just stuck to the key things. And so I showed her, for example, the groceries category. And I said, Mum, you're spending, whatever it was, $400 a week on groceries, right? That's how much we spend as a family of 5. Okay. Do you understand that that's an issue? Oh, yes. I said, so let's sort of dig in a little bit and just look at all the patterns of spend. And I said, I've picked up that, quite frequently there is cash being taken out at at the supermarket. Is that you? Oh, no, I don't take cash out from the supermarket. I didn't know you could do that. Right. Okay. And I said, okay, and now let's look at the cash withdrawal category, because there's a lot of that going on. And what I'm finding, like, I don't understand, Mum, is why you would do 3 cash out transactions in one day. Like, that seems on multiple occasions. That seems like a lot. She's like, oh, yeah, that doesn't seem right. I'm like, okay, so now we're starting to get somewhere. So now she's starting to at least, she's not meeting me halfway yet, but at least she's facing in my direction, right?
Does the penny drop for her in this catch up, Pascale?
It comes with the penny drops in the next part of the conversation, where I say, okay, so these are some strange patterns I'm seeing, but let me tell you about the most concerning patterns that I'm seeing. I said, and I created a separate category of the questionable transactions. And I said, did you spend, and I was just really, I went through the however many lines, the 40 lines, and I was like, did you spend $150 at Gazman? No. Did you spend $120 at Adidas? No. Did you spend $200 at ASOS? What's ASOS? And I was like, right. And I said, okay, so all these transactions, from what you're telling me, these are not your transactions. She said, correct. And I said, okay, this is what I've been trying to tell you. Now, I said, this, do you understand that in between the cash withdrawals and the overspend at the supermarket, of which, the cash withdrawals were inflating those numbers, and all the unauthorized spend at Gazman and Lacoste and Adidas and etc., that all of that means that this carer is using your bank card, is using your money to pay for their lifestyle and activities. And she was just silent. And then she said, but how? Because I have my card in my wallet. And I said, well, clearly you don't. Or maybe when you're asleep, it's being accessed. Or maybe there's a duplicate card or whatever. And it was a real struggle to get her to understand that you can have access to, a debit card in other ways other than that one card that she had. I said, look, maybe he's registered on his phone.
And I think that would be so hard for someone who is like, well, I've got my bank card, so how are they doing? It would be really hard to know, okay, well, you can set that card up on Apple Pay. You could have a photo of the numbers so you could do online shopping. I think that there are so many people who have never grown up in that world. And so for them, there is a logic to be like, well, I've got the card, so this can't be happening. And I also think,
right.
You would be wanting to just think, this can't be right. This can't be true. This can't be happening. I've got my bank card. This can't be, someone that I care about who is a family member or anyone, just frankly. And so I can understand this initial, it is denial, but I think it's valid.
Yeah, of course, because it's so shocking. And it's coming, as you mentioned earlier, Jess, this we'll call it unauthorized spending. It's coming from a person you trust implicitly and who is responsible for your care on a daily basis. And it is just, but particularly when that person has left a breadcrumb trail of to the opposite. So, for example, this person had said, oh, no, the Apple Pay on my phone doesn't work.
Right.
So not only was there no disclosure, but there was active smoke screens being put in place to make her think that this would not be possible.
And, I think it's worth calling out you obviously, as part of the life change that your mother went through, took the steps legally to, put in mechanisms to care for her. You on paper have done all of the right things, and you've looked at this and got on top of this quite quickly. You set up the budget with
Yeah.
her, you reviewed the budget, which sometimes we have great
Yes.
intentions to do, and then we just kind of get busy being busy. The other thing to think about is like how many family members have no oversight, have no ability to gain oversight because they don't have those legal mechanisms in place, and just have no goddamn idea that that might be happening to someone in their life who they love.
Exactly. Which is, as you say, I was lucky. I was lucky that I did have the structures in place. She'd forgotten about them, but that's a separate issue. But I did have the structures in place and could point to them and say, well, this is why I'm doing this. It's not because I want more work on my plate, but absolutely, to the earlier comment, if your parents are living interstate or in the country or overseas, like how do you know that this is happening? It could have gone, if I were interstate, for example, and if she could have been, if I'd waited a year down the track, she could have been totally out of money.
Totally. And I also just think, it does feel awkward to be like, hi, mum, or hi, dad, or hi, granddad, or grandma, or whoever it is. Can I have a look at your bank transactions? There's this like disconnect as well between, even having the conversation to ask that. And you're right. Like, obviously having this happen for 4 months is devastating, the amount of money that was taken. But what if it had been 12 months? What if it had been 4 years? And then the reason that you're having this conversation is because you realize, holy shit, there's nothing left. There is nothing left. And now what? Right. So now that you know that this is happening, now that she has some understanding of that this is happening, and is very different to, I think, the way that she's kind of turned up, if you will, to this meeting, what did you then do? What happens from there?
It was very tricky because she is a person who never confronts, other than with me with a 6-page, pages of notes about blah, blah, blah. But I knew that she would never confront the carer. She would never say, you have been stealing from me, or you have been, however she wanted to phrase it. So then my next task in that same conversation became finding her an out, giving her words to say so that we could change the bank card, right, or remove access to it, but also giving her words to say that she could say to the carer, which weren't going to cause strife or conflict or whatever it might be. So I said to her, okay, Mum, here's what you need to do. You need to just don't change bank accounts because, all your pension and whatnot goes in there, but just cancel the card, get a new one. Oh, but blah, 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 blah. And I said, Mum, this is going to continue unless you do this. Oh, well, let me have a think about it. I'm like, you haven't got time to think about it. You just need to do this straight away. Oh, well, okay. Oh, gosh, look at the time. I've got to get home for blah, blah, blah. Okay. So the next day, I sent her into the bank and I said, look, just talk to the bank manager about it. And then she came out she phoned me. She's like, oh, so-and-so from the bank, because she doesn't really do online banking, but she loves going in. So-and-so, the bank manager, said that what I should do is just cancel my card and get a new one. I was like, oh, how about that? Great. What a great idea, Mom. Yep. And so that's how she navigated it. So she did the thing, like she managed to cut off the access without ever having to confront the carer. I don't know what she said. I think she just said something like, oh, I lost my card and had to cancel it and get a new one.
And so there is a real risk that this could happen again with her new card.
Correct. Which is why in the the following months, I have been not waiting 4 months to look at her banking, but looking every month. And so far, so good, but the risk is ongoing,
Yeah, I mean that creates a whole lot of fear and just work. Obviously, the person has figured it out because they obviously had some level of oversight of the conversations that you were having. She's prepared for the meeting to have with you. Presumably, someone's known that meeting was occurring, and I would imagine perhaps being helped creating. I'm clearly making this up, but a 6-page note. I think that wouldn't have gone unnoticed if you have a carer, and so even though it wasn't implicitly stated, clearly there was an understanding that there's an awareness that's happened here, and lo and behold, the card has now been changed. I am having a really interesting reaction to that because my personality style is being really challenged here because I would find it incredibly hard, even if it's what a parent or family member wanted, was to not have the conflict moment. I don't know if I could do that without having that moment. So I think that, it also then becomes this thing where, all of these dynamics are just brewing away. And there is so much shame and stigma around money at the best of times, let alone all of these family dynamics. This is the perfect goddamn storm of shit, really, in one. And you can imagine for your mum, it probably would feel embarrassing, and there might be levels of shame or guilt that she didn't see it earlier, or ignored you, or thought that you were the one who had ill intent or something. And so I can imagine for her this would also be a really, really emotionally challenging, plus all the cognitive stuff that may or may not be going on. Everyone's having a tough time here, except it sounds like the person who needed to be held squarely accountable to that. And
but there's another, if we have the time, there's another fascinating parallel, a story that was going on here. So when I set Mum up with a budget in the February, I also set her up with a savings plan, going into a digital-only bank, which was offering great, interest rate and so on. And I set up an auto, direct debit that every, whatever it was, fortnight or whatever, there'd be a few $100s going into this digital bank. And the reason I set up this digital bank was because I knew the access codes, and mum did as well, but I knew that this person did not have experience with that bank. And so I was trying to keep it ring-fenced as much as I could. So around the time that this is all blowing up and I'm discovering heaps of, stolen money, basically, and with the digital bank, I've been checking in with Mum and, look, I'm trying to encourage her and make her feel good about money and that she's, now on the right track and so on. And we're calling this the holiday fund and so on. And I said, so about a fortnight before all of this came to light, I'd sat with her at a cafe and we'd looked at the balance of this digital bank, and I was like, oh, wow, you've got 15,000 in there. Isn't that great? And just in such a short space of time, and, you're doing really well and blah. This was before I had discovered that she was going backwards on the other bank account. And then, so now we have all the blow-ups and the unauthorized transactions, and I can't get in contact with her. And she's stalling and she's da-da-da. Let's say we're now, if it took me 3 weeks to actually sit down with her, let's say we're at 2 weeks and 5 days, right? When she calls me and she says, for something about, I'm going to the city today. And I said, I'm going to be in the city today. How about we meet up? She goes, no, I've got errands to run and I've got something to collect. And I was like, well, I can collect the thing for you, whatever. And she said, no, I'll slow you down with my hip. And I said, okay. And then later on in the day, she phones me again, and I can hear that she's really feisty, and she's clearly het up about something. And I said, "Oh, what's wrong? You sound upset." She said, "Well, I went into the city today to go to that bank that you set me up with." And I said, "Really? The 79-year-old woman with a shocking hip who can't walk, you went into the city?" Yes. Well, I just wanted to know how much was in there. And I said, "Why don't you just ask me?" She didn't answer. And then I said, "So, Mum, I've told you 10 times, like, there is no physical branch. Like, they don't exist physically. Sure, there's an office." Well, I ended up at the office, and it was good because then they could tell me how much was in my account. I'm thinking, oh, okay, great. And she said, "And there's only $16,000 in there." I said, "Yeah, sounds about right. But there should be 24,000. I'm like, whoa. Where are you getting this from? She's like, "Well, my notes show." And I was like, "I don't know actually what you're talking about, Mum. Do you remember that 2 weeks ago we sat and we looked and it was 15,000 something? If you're only contributing 500 a week, how is it going to be $24,000? Oh, well." And I said, "So hang on, why didn't you just call me or message me or something me so that I could, help you log in and we could do this together?" "Oh, I just wanted to know for my own purposes." And I was stunned. And then I came home, I was absolutely bewildered, and I was trying to put it all together. And I was saying to myself, how is it that an elderly woman who can't walk and has been told repeatedly that there is no physical branch gets on a bus, shuffles around the city, because she is fixated on finding out the number for herself of the balance, weirdly does not remember the last balance and the balance before that, and is coming up with this idea that there should be another 50% worth of money in the account. And then I realized what was going on.
What was going on?
Well, because I had now been sending messages over the last few days to her going, "You're going backwards by $6,000 a month, and half of that is because of the carer using your funds and in unauthorized transactions." What the carer had now done was wound Mum up, and he was now setting in place another smokescreen, which was that I was stealing money from her.
Oh, God.
Because why else? Why else would she go to all that effort when she can't walk to talk to someone because she has forgotten the login, whatever? And how on earth would she think that there was 50% more money in the account than there should have been?
And I guess at this point, for a lot of people, it would be like, I just need certainty for me, because one person's saying one thing who I love and trust, and another person who I love and trust is saying the other thing. I need to go and figure this out. I can understand how your mum would be like, I just need to go and sort this out myself. And obviously there's a huge amount of, context and stuff that's going on behind the scenes here.
Yes.
So my guess is that, albeit it now requires a huge amount of oversight, this is something that, the money is never recovered. There is no path or plan to recover the money.
No.
And so,
despite promises from carer.
Oh, okay. So the carer has acknowledged now that this has happened, and that made a commitment.
Not to me, but has somehow it has. I don't know the conversation that Mum's had with carer, but when I've asked her directly, she's like, "Oh, he's got plans to repay." I'm like, okay, well, that's great. What do those plans look like? And then she won't go into any detail.
I mean, I find working in financial services, my family are the last people on earth to listen to me, and exactly like what happened with the bank manager. They say the same thing, and you're just like, oh, wow. If only I'd thought of that very smart idea. I think it probably is the same in a lot of families, irrespective of whether you work in finance or not. And, what I'm hearing or thinking about is that, having these third party, independent, arm's length, no conflict of interest sort of people around you is
Yes.
probably what people need in these moments, being the lawyer that helped you set all these things up or the bank manager. For people who are suspecting this is happening or just genuinely not sure if this is going on for anyone that they love or care about, like, do you have any advice or, things that worked in your example or things that didn't work that could be lessons for like how to support someone that might be trying to navigate this as the person in your shoes?
Yes, it's a great question because as you've just highlighted, Jess, like the at its core here, what we have is mum going, well, who do I trust? Do I trust person A or person B? And when you playing devil's advocate against myself, right? The fact that I've been in financial services 30 years, the fact I've got a Master of Commerce, blah, 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 that doesn't make me squeaky clean. Like, it doesn't guarantee that I'm squeaky clean. I mean, I know I'm squeaky clean, but it does, there is no certainty for her around that. But I am done with trying to fight this anymore because it is so it drains so much of my energy, and I've been trying to protect her for not just this year, but many years. I just find myself, I will never win this. I will always, and partly that's because I'm female. And the other kind of postscript to this story is that 2 days after the whole walk into get on a bus in the city, try and find a branch of a bank that doesn't exist physically, and the inferences around me stealing her money, etc. A couple of days later, I was helping mum sort her email because, again, she's terrible with this stuff. And I saw an email from the carer titled "Protection for You," words to that effect. And in it, it talked about changing her will. It talked about revoking the power of attorney and so on. And I just went, I can't fight this. And so what I did and what I've put into place now is, and hopefully this will be, a lesson for some of the listeners. I have recently discovered that you can lean on the government, right, to outsource this to. So I have started an application with the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal, or NCAT for short. And I'm currently going through the process of applying for them to be the trustee and guardian of mum's money, because I see it as a way that it's going to have, number one, it's going to improve her and my relationship. It's going to remove that, that constant, for mum, he said, she said, he said, she said aspect. If the state effectively becomes the guardian, then the access that this person will have and the influence that this person will have over mum is going to be massively diminished. And mum, I've explained this to mum because it's part of the process. And I'm saying, this is why I'm doing this, blah, blah, blah. She's like, well, what if I don't want this done? And I said, well, that's, there's going to be a hearing and you'll get to put forward your side of the story and they'll make a decision from there.
Oh, goodness me. Okay. I also just wanted to add in that there is a helpline, I think, called the Elder Abuse Helpline, which is 1-800-ELDER-HELP, which I think might give people some resources. We also know that a lot of the banks now have got teams and resources that are dedicated to all sorts of domestic violence, but also, financial abuse and elderly abuse. And obviously there's a whole bunch of resources that they might have, but someone needs to go and seek that help and ask for that help, which can be the hardest step. As we know, people in Australia are aging, and the intergenerational wealth transfer, as I said at the top of the episode, this is presenting a lot of people with ideas in terms of what they want to do with money that they are yet to receive. And so this problem is not going away. This problem is going to unfortunately grow and swell. And I think the thing that I'm really sitting with is that this feels really stressful and really messy and complicated and challenging and all of the things, especially as someone who is, standing up for someone and that person, but maybe isn't in the right place to recognize the good intent.
Help.
And that you're genuinely trying to help. And I just feel for you because it sounds like this has been such a lot, and it feels like it's created tension. And of course, like, we would prefer the tension than the alternative, which is we never know, or we never have the courage to speak up and do something about it. But, to share your story at a time when this is pretty fresh and this is still unraveling and the story is not sort of over by the sounds of it, I think is something that I'm hugely grateful for, because I feel like people often feel a huge amount of shame, especially when we talk about financial abuse. I should have seen it sooner. It's my fault. We internalize all of these things when often we either are the victim or we are close to the victim and we are not the perpetrator. And the people who should feel all of those things are the people who do that. So I want to say, on behalf of the Financially Fierce community, thank you sincerely for sharing your story. It is one that I wish you didn't have to share, because I wish it didn't exist for you. But I genuinely think more of us need to be more on top of what is going on for our elderly family members. I'm thinking, a particular family member of mine. Yeah. It's given me some, chills, to be honest, about shit. I actually probably need to go and do some deep digging here. Pascale, you work in financial services, as you said, and you have done for a long time. Before we wrap up today's conversation, if people want to learn more about you as you share more of your story, because I know about this story because you shared some of it online, like, how can people find you and reach out to you if they want to thank you for your bravery in sharing today's story?
Yeah, thank you. The best way to contact me is at my Instagram channel, which is Dare to Be Rich, or via LinkedIn. I'm the only Pascale Helyar-Moray on LinkedIn, so I'm fairly easy to find.
Beautiful. Unlike Jessica Brady, we're a dime a dozen. Today has been an episode that has really brought in so many of the elements that we feel day to day with money in such a personal way, and to share that story. I'm hugely grateful. So thank you to you, and thank you to all of our listeners. And please, 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 if you feel like a friend needs to hear this, because maybe they've got an aging parent or a family member, maybe you need to send this to your siblings to be like, maybe we never, we need to learn from this. I would be grateful, enormously grateful, if you could share this with someone to hopefully learn some lessons as soon as possible, ahead of time, ideally, so that we can all learn and grow together. That is all for today's episode. You now know what to do. Go and be financially fierce. Bye.
We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia. We pay our respects to elders past and present. Any advice is general financial advice only, which does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Because of that, you should consider if the advice is appropriate to you and your needs before acting on the information. If you do choose to buy a financial product, read the Product Disclosure Statement, PDS, and Target Market Determination, TMD, and obtain appropriate financial advice tailored to your needs. Jessica Brady is an Authorised Representative of Paragem Pty Ltd, Authorised Representative Number 1259972, AFSL 297276, ABN 16108571875, Corporate Authorised Representative Number 1305567.